The personal statement in general is just an essay trying to figure out who you are and telling your story. But under the context of medical school, it's answering the question, why medicine? Why do you want to be a physician? Who are you beyond the GPA and MCAS score?
There are three different types of application services: the AMCAS, the TMDSAS, and the AACOMAS. For the AMCAS application, that is the application for MD schools in the United States and Canada. For the TMDSAS, that is the application service for Texas medical schools, and the AACOMAS is for DO schools. The AMCAS and the AACOMAS have a character limit of 5,300 characters, while the TMDSAS has a character limit of 5,000 characters.
All right, so let's jump right into it.
How do we start?
How do we start? So, just a quick disclaimer: this is just the way that we've developed our personal statements and the ways that have worked for us. But there is not a one size fits all when it comes to personal statements. So, step one: let's brainstorm. What are the stories that you have? Just write down anything and everything that has to do with
why you want to be a doctor.
Why?
So you want to write down just everything about how you want to be a doctor. Literally, when I started, at one point I had just wrote down like 3 pages of just nonsense of why do I want to be a doctor? Every little thing. It's going to be bad at first, and that's okay, because this initial step is just trying to consolidate every story that you might have that could tell why you want to be a doctor. Once you have that story, then you want to look and see what ties these stories together to tell a story with your overall application.
With this brainstorming step, it might be helpful to just be thinking on it and typing things randomly. Maybe have a note in your notes app that if you think of anything while you're walking to class or on the metro, that you're just like, oh my goodness, that's an experience that I've had that I, might want to put in this application. You can just write it down right there, right there. So this is just all of the stories that you could possibly tell.
Step 2 is for you to just start writing. Start writing as early as possible, because it's going to take you a long time to actually get through this. You're not going to get it done in a week, and if you do get it done in a week, it may not be your best work.
The first time you do it, it's not going to be great. You just want to get those stories that you've been brainstorming into paragraph form to kind of see what is the thread that ties all of these together. What is the story?
Step 3 is editing. Initially, your edits aren't going to be a lot of grammatical errors, but more so like, do I even need to tell this story?
So one thing in my experience with editing, though that first draft was really hard for me because I had all of these ideas and I had kind of a story that I wanted to tell, but I was having trouble putting that on paper. So with those first edits, I was really just focusing on, is this saying what I wanted to say? Am I getting my point across?
I feel like for me, it was more so I didn't know what story I wanted to tell. I had so many experiences I could draw from, but I didn't know how to tie in my 3 or 5 different stories together that was coherent and tell one singular, this is why I want to be a doctor. Now, we're going to be talking about the feedback you receive. When it comes to feedback, you want to have 3 separate groups for people you want to see feedback from. First, before you show your personal statement to anyone else, once you figure out what story you want to tell, show it to people who are closest to you, people who have been along with you throughout your journey, because they are going to be the people who know you the most, and tell you, hey, this is a story you should be telling. Or you could add a little bit more detail, because I know what you're trying to say, because I know you, but you're not telling that in your essay right now.
These close people are able to see you and compare you, knowing you, to your personal statement and see if they're adding up. Once you kind of get all those edits and you're still working with it, but you've gotten it into a place that you are starting to like it, the next group of people that you want to look at your personal statement is people in admissions or your advisors who've read personal statements before and know what they're supposed to sound like and what they're supposed to look like. These people can give really good feedback from the perspective of somebody who would be accepting med student.
Because they know what med schools are looking for.
Exactly.
The last group would be people who have recently gone through the process that you have, or recent medical students, or people who have recently applied, because then you know their perspective of what they have to go through with theirs. But you don't want to get too many people to look at your statement overall, because if you get too much advice from too many different people, it will dwindle down what you're actually trying to say with your own story. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is your story. You don't have to take all the feedback you get from anybody. You don't have to take any feedback if it isn't what you're trying to say.
I think that a common mistake is that the more feedback, the better. I don't think that's necessarily the truth because of what Jaden just said. You don't want to lose yourself and lose your story in the midst of all of the feedback that you're getting from your personal. Now we're going to talk about a few do's and don'ts when it comes to personal statement. Our first thing that you should do that you hear commonly when it comes to personal statements is show, don't tell. So sometimes I'm like, what does that even mean? It means that it's better to show that you have a trait and show kind of who you are than to just tell them.
One of the biggest examples of this is, let's say you want to write about an experience that you had as like a medical assistant, and you're saying, wow, I was a medical assistant, and being a medical assistant taught me how to be empathetic to patients. How did that teach you?
It would be much better for you to tell a story about your interactions with a patient and show I had to say this and I related to them on this level, and show that you're empathizing with them rather than just saying I'm good at empathizing.
Rather than saying, okay, these are the qualities I have and this is what I did, more so show the impact that you had on others and how different experiences have impacted you.
The next do is that you need to allow time for edits. This is, as we previously talked about, not something that you can do in a weekend. You need to be able to write everything down, have it be bad, get a little space from it, and then come back to it with like new, fresh eyes and a new perspective on it. So this is why it's really important that no matter where you are in your pre-med journey right now, that you kind of start on this now. Start thinking about those big questions of like, what is the impact that I hope to have on medicine? Why do I want to be a doctor? So that you can kind of start this process sooner rather than later, because it takes a lot of time. I know I had like 5 renditions of my personal statement before I was ready to turn it in.
I'm currently applying to medical school right now, and I think I am on my 5th edit. Right now, I feel like I'm at the point where I know what story I'm trying to tell. I know what story I'm trying to get across. It's just maybe minor things, okay, add details here. Like you could maybe tell this story better, or like small grammar mistakes. But it took me a long time to get to this point. I wrote maybe my first draft of this first semester my senior year. And I'm not writing on this every day for a week. I make it right, maybe take a little bit of time, then I look back at it again, make edits, and then I maybe will write it, then try to write it again, send it off to people, get their edits back, and just keep redoing that story over and over and over again to figure out what exactly I'm trying to say.
You need time to cut what you don't like and figure out what you do like. It's also kind of fun to do it that way, to like look back on your, first draft of your personal statement and be like, oh wow, this was rough. But then look back at the 5th one and be like, wow, I would let her in med school.
That's funny.
So yeah.
The last do that we're going to be talking about is staying focused. Remember, you were trying to tell a coherent story with your entire application. So you want all your themes to tie in together. You want to stay focused and make sure you're talking about you and your experiences. Don't get distracted with talking about, like when you're talking about a lab experience, talk about, okay, this is the type of research we were doing and all that. It should be more so, what were your experiences in the lab? What did you learn, and what did your experiences inform about you wanting to be a doctor?
And how did you impact that experience? To go back to the example of a medical assistant, and really any experience, it doesn't really matter what experience it was if you didn't have an impact there and it didn't impact you, which is really what the admissions committee is looking for. Now we're going to move on to a couple of don'ts. So the first don't is don't disparage. This means be careful when it comes to, talking bad about medical professionals, about a bad experience that you had with a nurse or a doctor or anyone in the healthcare field. It sometimes can come off as a little arrogant and immature if you're just like, I had this really bad experience with this doctor and that was a bad doctor, but I'm going to be a good doctor. And it just kind of sounds a little immature when you're just kind of focusing on that. If you're going to talk about a bad experience that you've had with a physician,
don't be overly negative. I feel like for anything that you're going to talk about in your application, if you're talking about something bad that happened, don't take only the negatives from it. See what that maybe taught you about medicine, but don't try and say this was a bad doctor. Say this was a bad experience, and this is something that could happen a lot in medicine. But don't say, okay, yes, I'm going to be better to this doctor, because that can come off as arrogant.
Our next don't is don't overdo it. You don't want to go too far in either direction. Too arrogant and I'm just amazing versus too self-deprecating. For example, you don't want to say, okay, so this is what I did in this experience and I just carried this team on my back and nobody else was doing anything and I did it all and I'm amazing. You want me in med school. You don't want to go that far and sound arrogant, but you also don't want to go in the other direction. Oh, I was just awful. I'm terrible. Like, I'm really bad at this and this and this, and then this doctor came and saved me. Because that also kind of sounds like that you're not confident and then you don't think highly of yourself. You want to tell your story for exactly what it is. You're not perfect. You're not awful either. Just be honest and show who you are.
The next don't we're going to be talking about is don't use overly fancy language. Doctors don't need to use big fancy words to get their point across. Be concise with your stories, but make sure that your stories you're telling are stories that people want to listen to.
You don't have to use overly flowery language. Your personal statement should read like a story. Somebody should want to read it, see who you are through it, but you don't talk like thou shalt blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? You don't speak like that. You don't want to read that in the admissions committee.
A last don't we're going to be talking about is don't do any overly cliche things. Like one of the most common ones, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. There are so many jobs that will allow you to help people. What is it specifically like about medicine, specifically about being a doctor, that makes you want to help people?
If you just want to help people, then why not be a firefighter? Why not, go into construction?
There's so many ways to help people. Or even within medicine, why not be a nurse? Why not be a researcher? It's like, why specifically a doctor?
Exactly. And even if you do want to start at, okay, I want to help people, why don't we talk about which ways you want to help people? What are the areas that you want to impact? And after you ask those questions off the branch of I want to help people, let's talk about those things rather than
I want to help people. Because I want to help people doesn't tell you anything about why you want to be a doctor.
And I'm telling you, if admissions committees see
it's a turn off.
They're like immediately no.
Thank you for watching. Hopefully you've learned something that will help you write your personal statement.
Yes, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and ask any questions you may have about the personal statement or your med school application process down below. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.